The message arrived at 6:42 a.m., piercing the quiet of my kitchen like a knife through fog. Plain black text on a stark white screen, each word immovable and cold. No greeting, no preamble, no hesitation. Don't expect me to take care of you in old age. I have my own life and family. I read it twice. Then a third time, deliberately, as if repetition might dull the sting. It didn't. The words sat there, sharp and deliberate, like the tip of a scalpel poised over the heart. Chosen, every single one of them. I was sitting at the small oak kitchen table, the one where I had spread newspapers and coloring pages for him when he was little, where I had tucked napkins under spilled milk, helped him with homework, packed lunches, listened endlessly. The kettle whistled angrily on the stove until I turned it off, and the tea I'd planned to make remained cold, untouched. I did not cry. I did not shake. I simply sat still, staring at the screen. Something inside me had gone quiet, a space between my bones where disbelief and sorrow collided. The message was not written in anger. That part unsettled me most. There were no accusations, no insults, no hints of blame, just a statement, a declaration, a boundary etched so clearly it could have been filed with a lawyer and referenced as evidence. I locked the phone and set it face down. As if placing it away could contain the damage it had done. I am 72 years old, a widow, fully capable of cooking my meals, balancing my accounts, remembering each detail of a life lived, and of a son raised with care and love. And yet, this message made me feel simultaneously unmoored and strangely exposed. I didn't raise him to owe me anything. I raised him to be kind, responsible, honest, to understand that family is not a transaction. Somewhere along the way, I realized he had learned a different lesson. Perhaps his life taught him what my heart could not, that relationships, even with blood, could be conditional, measured in what one could gain rather than give. Later that morning, I went for my walk. The air was crisp, sharp with autumn chill. The street was quiet, leaves drifting like confetti from tired trees. Neighbors waved. Mrs. Alvarez asked how I was feeling after my last doctor's appointment. I smiled and said I was fine. My body was fine. My heart, my understanding of my own life, felt fractured in ways I could not immediately name. As I walked, memories rose unbidden. His first steps across this very sidewalk, the way his hand felt in mine. The day I dropped him off for kindergarten, his little backpack bouncing with excitement, and the night he called from college, drunk and terrified, begging me not to tell his father. I never did. I thought of his first heartbreak, the scraped knees, the lonely nights where he curled into my side as I whispered reassurances. I wondered when I had stopped being a mother and started being a future obligation. Back home, I sat in the living room and read the message again, this time noticing the words that were absent. I love you, I am worried. Let's talk. Not a single one of them appeared, only don't expect. Only a command that felt like judgment, delivered from a hand I had once held through the storms of his life. Expectations. Dangerous, subtle, deadly. I had expected very little, a call once in a while, occasional visits, respect. And yet here it was, stripped to its essence. A son had chosen a future where I did not exist as a priority. The phone rang at noon. His name flashed. I didn't answer. Not out of anger, not out of spite, but out of clarity. If he wanted to speak, he could choose accountability as he had chosen words, direct, deliberate, unaccompanied by empathy. The voicemail followed seconds later, crisp, rehearsed. Mom, I hope you read my message the right way. I'm not abandoning you. I'm just setting boundaries. You can't assume I'll be there for everything. That's not fair to me or my family. Boundaries. Another word carefully chosen to sanitize cruelty. I deleted it. That afternoon, I opened the folder I hadn't touched since Robert died. Insurance papers, bank statements, the will we had prepared together, anticipating a son grateful for guidance rather than entitled to inheritance. For the first time, I read it not as Margaret Morrison, his mother, but as Margaret Morrison, a woman assessing her own life, her own autonomy. And for the first time, I dared to ask the question I had buried under decades of love and duty. If my own child had already decided he would not stand beside me in my later years, why was I still planning my life as if he would? I sat for hours, coffee gone cold, sun shifting across the floor, absorbing the weight of that realization. A strange clarity emerged, one I had never known before. I would not wait for approval. I would not structure the remainder of my life around fear or hope that he might change. I would honor my own needs, my dignity, my sense of self. By evening, I had made the first of many decisions that would define this new chapter. I would review my finances, solidify my trust, document everything. Every text, every call, every gesture would be recorded. This was no longer about resentment. This was about survival, autonomy, and clarity. And somewhere deep in the hollow ache left by betrayal, a small flame flickered, an ember of resolve, of self respect. I was Margaret Morrison, a widow, a mother, a woman who had loved completely, who had given endlessly. And now I would live for myself. I didn't know yet what that meant in practice, only that the path forward required courage I hadn't known I still possessed. The message had been sent, but the story was far from over. The next morning, I called Thomas, my attorney, my anchor in storms I hadn't realized were coming. His voice was steady, calm, measured, everything I needed when my own heart felt like it was cracking. Margaret, he said, I read the message, I know what it did to you, but don't panic. Let's think strategically. I exhaled, slow, deliberate. I don't want panic, I want clarity, and I want protection. What if they try something? Thomas paused, thoughtful. They've already tried something. That message was the first volley, but it's more than words. It's psychological. It's a threat dressed as honesty. They're trying to push you into reversing your trust. Don't, I stared at the phone. My trust, years of careful planning. Assets allocated to causes I cared about, to family members who had shown responsibility and love, to friends who had been constants through lonely nights. And now my own son, the boy I had held through fevers and scraped knees, was trying to force me to undo it. Document everything, Thomas said firmly. Every call, every message, every email. If this escalates, we may need proof for custody considerations, or more importantly, for your own protection. Custody, the word made my chest tighten. I hadn't thought about it in years, not since he was a toddler, and I worried about scraped knees and playground bullies. Now it carried a weight I hadn't anticipated, the idea that my own grandchildren might be used as leverage. I felt a surge of fury I hadn't known I could feel. How dare they? How dare anyone treat love as currency, affection as bargaining chips? My instincts sharpened, cold and precise. I wouldn't be manipulated. I wouldn't be threatened. Not by him, not by anyone. 3 weeks later, the letter arrived. Not from Thomas, not from me. From David's attorney, a prestigious firm downtown known for aggressive litigation. I opened it carefully, my hands steady despite the churn in my stomach. Mrs. Morrison, our client, David Morrison, has retained our services regarding questions about your mental competency and recent financial decisions made under potential duress or diminished capacity. We respectfully request that you submit to an independent psychiatric evaluation. I read it aloud to no one, the words tasting bitter. Competency. Evaluation. Duress. The message was clear. If I wanted to keep my grandchildren, if I wanted to maintain any semblance of dignity, I would have to comply with their plan. I called Thomas immediately. His voice had a hint of restrained excitement. Margaret, this is what I was expecting. They're going for incompetency. Let them. You'll pass any evaluation they throw at you, and their case collapses. But we have to be smart. Agree, but insist we select the psychiatrist from a court-approved list. That way we control the process. I nodded to myself. This wasn't fear anymore. This was war. And I would fight smart, just as Thomas advised. Within a week, I was sitting across from Dr. Patricia Hernandez, a forensic psychiatrist renowned for elder competency cases. She was professional, meticulous, impossible to charm, impossible to intimidate. 3 hours passed as she asked me about my life, my finances, my relationship with David, my education, my routines. She tested my memory, logic, reasoning, and reviewed my medical records. She even interviewed my doctor. At the end, she leaned slightly forward, voice calm but firm. Mrs. Morrison, I will file a formal report with the court, but I can tell you now, there is no evidence of cognitive decline or diminished capacity. Your decisions, though perhaps unusual to family, are rational and well considered. I exhaled. Relief mingled with anger. She paused, her tone softer off the record. I've seen this before. Adult children who expect to inherit react poorly when parents assert autonomy. This is financial elder abuse in reverse. They're trying to coerce you into compliance. Her words named the fear I had felt but been afraid to speak aloud. Fear of loss, fear of being perceived as vulnerable, fear of being manipulated by the very child I had raised. The competency hearing was set for November 15th. The gray courtroom smelled of old wood, the scent of tension thick in the air. David and Jessica sat across the aisle, expressions carefully neutral. Their attorney, a polished man in an expensive suit, whispered counsel and flicked papers with practiced precision. I sat with Thomas, my hair neat, my hands steady, my back straight. The world felt quiet, like the seconds before a storm broke. David's attorney began, painting me as a vulnerable widow, making erratic decisions, unduly influenced by my lawyer. Thomas remained composed. He suggested mild early stage dementia. Then Dr. Hernandez testified. 15 minutes later, their entire case crumbled. She outlined my financial literacy, my autonomy, my logical reasoning, my independence, my sharpness, my life. She concluded that while my decisions might be emotionally challenging for family, they were fully competent and autonomous. David's attorney tried to recover. But isn't it unusual for a mother to disinherit her only child? Unusual, yes, Dr. Hernandez replied. Incompetent? Absolutely not. I watched David's face. Red, furious, unmoving. The words could not reach him. I felt the surge of victory, but also the hollow ache that accompanies it. He had not been convinced, not even for a moment. As the judge banged her gavel, dismissing the case, I realized something vital. I had won not by anger or manipulation, but by truth and clarity. The storm had passed, but the residue remained. Love, betrayal, autonomy, they could coexist in the same space, and now I had to navigate it. The courtroom had emptied, the echoes of gavel strikes still lingering in the high, gray ceiling. I stepped outside into the crisp November air, Thomas close behind me. My victory was complete on paper, yet my heart felt strangely heavy. Triumph was there, yes, but so was grief. How could it hurt to win when the cost had been the relationship I had hoped for with my son? David's glare lingered as we walked down the courthouse steps. I forced my gaze forward, not letting the bitter sting reach my voice. Thomas's hand brushed my shoulder, grounding me. You did the right thing, he said softly. I wanted to believe it. I wanted to feel proud. But all I felt was a hollow ache, a grief for the son I thought I had known. Back home, I poured a cup of tea and sank into my favorite chair by the window. The city was moving on, oblivious to the battles fought in courtrooms and hearts. I couldn't, my mind raced through every moment, the messages, the threats, the lawyer's letter. Everything pointed to the same truth. David and Jessica had been counting on my inheritance to sustain a life they couldn't afford. I felt a flash of anger, quickly tempered by sorrow. This wasn't merely greed. This was the reckless illusion of entitlement, blind to the consequences of their own choices. 2 months later, a registered letter arrived. The handwriting on the envelope was unfamiliar, official. My heart fluttered, part anxiety, part curiosity. Inside was confirmation of what I had begun to suspect. David and Jessica's finances had collapsed. The mortgage company had initiated foreclosure proceedings. Their lifestyle, once so polished, so enviable, had been built entirely on borrowed time and money. I made another call to Thomas, recounting the news. He was unsurprised but careful with his words. Margaret, you have options. You could confront them legally, press charges, pursue fraud, but sometimes the law isn't the only justice. Sometimes letting people face the consequences of their own choices is the lesson that matters. I stared at the ceiling, weighing anger against empathy. Charlie and Mia, my grandchildren, were innocent in all of this. Their lives had been intertwined in a web of entitlement and threats, and I would not allow them to be pawns any longer. My choice was clear: protect myself, maintain dignity, and still offer love to the children. Thomas recommended a private investigator, someone retired but experienced in estate matters, discreet and thorough. I agreed. Document everything, he said again, the phrase now etched into my mind like a mantra. Within weeks, the findings arrived. The report was meticulous, horrifying, and clarifying all at once. David and Jessica had spent over $200,000 beyond their means in 6 years. Vacations, luxury items, cosmetic procedures, private school tuition, country club memberships. They had borrowed against anticipated inheritance repeatedly. Emails revealed David consulting with an attorney years prior about expediting his mother's estate. Every detail pointed to a plan carefully executed, waiting for my eventual passing. I felt a sick twist in my stomach. The son I had loved, the child I had cradled, had planned this, not out of need, not out of desperation, but out of confidence in my death. Betrayal cut deep, sharper than I had imagined. But I also felt a strange calm. I had clarity now. I saw the truth, unflinching, without the distortion of love-blinded hope. Thomas and I discussed the next steps. Do you want them to pay legally? Or do you want them to know you see everything? He asked carefully. My decision came swiftly, like a lighthouse-piercing fog. I would not pursue criminal charges. I didn't want scandal. I didn't want revenge. But I wanted acknowledgement. I wanted them to understand they had lost, not just financially, but morally. A letter was drafted with Thomas's help, precise, firm, yet not cruel. I would state the facts, offer guidance for financial recovery, and extend a small olive branch. Acknowledgement that the door to rebuilding relationships existed, but only if approached with honesty and respect. Not greed. Not entitlement, only respect. 3 weeks passed in tense silence. I wondered if the message would even reach them, or if it would be ignored, brushed off as the bitterness of an old mother. Then, on Christmas Eve, there was a knock at the door. Standing there were Charlie and Mia, holding the hand of a woman I did not recognize. A court appointed supervisor, my grandchildren, my heart surged. The children were unaware of the depth of their parents' mistakes, yet here they were, trusting me with 2 precious hours. We baked cookies, read stories, and played gently in the light snow falling outside. Their laughter was music, their trust a balm I hadn't realized I needed. When it was time to leave, Mia hugged me tightly. Grandma, can we come back? She asked, eyes wide and earnest. Anytime, sweetheart, anytime, I whispered, holding her close. The warmth of that hug, the simple, untainted love of a child, healed some invisible fracture inside me. As I watched the car drive away, David did not look at my house. He had been stripped of the illusions that had once guided his greed, facing now the consequences of his choices. I did not feel triumphant, not really. What I felt was clarity, my dignity intact, my autonomy preserved, and my love for Charlie and Mia, unbroken, untainted by their father's mistakes. The first snow of December settled softly over Portland, blanketing the streets in a quiet calm that felt almost surreal compared to the storm I'd weathered. My mornings began to take on a new rhythm, long walks, cups of steaming coffee, and stretches of time spent simply breathing. The world seemed sharper, clearer, yet more fragile. Each moment was a reminder that life was fleeting, and that the battles I had fought weren't just for money or control. They were for my peace, my autonomy, my dignity. The supervised visits with Charlie and Mia continued every month. At first, I felt awkward, like a teacher testing new students. But the children quickly relaxed, filling my home with laughter and the soft hum of innocence. We built gingerbread houses, read chapters from favorite books, and wandered through the small park nearby. Each time I saw their wide, trusting eyes, I felt a bittersweet pang, grief for the son I thought I had, gratitude for the love I could still offer. One afternoon, as we painted holiday decorations, Mia asked quietly, "Grandma, why don't we see you more?" Her voice was tentative, fearful of an answer that might hurt. I paused, setting down my brush, and took her small hands in mine. Because sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt the people they love, I explained gently. But I want you to know something important. I will always love you, always. Even when you grow up, and even if your parents don't understand everything the way I do. Charlie leaned over my shoulder, curiosity in his eyes. Does that mean you're not mad at mom and dad? I looked at him, seeing the reflection of my own hope and disappointment in his face. I'm sad, I admitted, but I've learned something important. We can't control the choices of others. We can only protect ourselves, make our own lives meaningful, and love the people we can reach. Meanwhile, Thomas continued his quiet vigilance. He kept me informed about David and Jessica's situation, which, though I tried to ignore the urge to gloat, was inevitably painful for them. Their bankruptcy had forced them into a cramped apartment, far from the comforts they had flaunted. Jessica had to find a retail job, the children were removed from private school, and David, once a business owner, now worked as a sales associate in a small electronics store. The boat was gone, the luxury car replaced with a decade-old sedan, and the lifestyle built on expectation had collapsed entirely. Despite the temptation to feel satisfaction, I felt only a deep sadness. They had squandered opportunities, burned bridges, and chased illusions rather than genuine relationships. And yet, I couldn't let my sorrow or anger dictate my actions. My responsibility was to the children, to my own life, and to the legacy I could still build. With that clarity came purpose. I threw myself into work, volunteering at the local children's hospital. I read to sick children, played games with them, and comforted their anxious parents. Each smile, each spark of joy, filled the grandmother-shaped hole in my heart that David and Jessica had left. I also focused on my scholarship fund at Roberts University, hearing from students who had been able to continue their education thanks to the support. Their gratitude, their promise, was a legacy far more enduring than any inheritance. I reconnected with my niece Emma, forming a bond deeper than family obligation. We talked, laughed, and shared experiences I hadn't realized I'd been missing. She called me her wisest mentor, and in her admiration, I found renewed purpose. My friends, my book club, Even the painting classes where I sold a few pieces to local galleries, all became threads in a life I was actively creating, not passively enduring. And yet, every step forward reminded me of what I had lost. David, the son I once loved, seemed like a stranger. His threats, his manipulations, his coldness, they had changed him, or perhaps revealed who he had always been. That realization stung more than the loss of money, more than the legal battles, more than any court victory. Love and betrayal, I learned, could coexist in painful harmony. One quiet evening, as the snow fell gently outside, I sat by the fireplace with a book in my lap, a cup of tea warming my hands. Thomas visited briefly, checking in, his calm presence a reminder that I wasn't alone. "You've done what most people can't," he said. "You've protected yourself, loved wisely, and built a life that's truly yours." I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my chest. The future was uncertain, yes, but for the first time in years, it felt mine to shape. I had learned that setting boundaries wasn't cruelty, it was self preservation. That loving someone didn't mean allowing them to harm you. That true family was defined not by blood alone, but by respect, care, and trust. And while the pain of betrayal lingered, it no longer controlled me. I had my grandchildren, my community, my friends, and my own sense of self. And sometimes that was enough. Sometimes it was more than enough. The next visit with Charlie and Mia approached, and I felt anticipation, not dread. I would meet them with love, with patience, with joy. The world might be harsh, but in those moments it could also be tender, warm, and infinitely rewarding. And I intended to embrace it fully, without regret, without fear. Winter deepened in Portland, and with it, a quiet stillness settled over my home. The snow crunched under my boots as I walked to the mailbox, the city muted beneath a thick white blanket. Inside, the warmth of the fire and the scent of pine filled the rooms. The world outside could rage, but here, I had created a sanctuary, a place where I could breathe without fear, without manipulation. The letters from Roberts University students arrived more frequently now. Each one was a window into lives transformed by the scholarship I had funded. One note in particular made me pause. A young woman named Leela had written about how she could continue her nursing studies after losing her family's financial support. She described long nights studying, moments of despair, and the immense relief that the scholarship had provided. Tears blurred my vision as I folded the letter carefully. This was my legacy, not money handed down to entitlement, but opportunity given to those who would build, who would care, who would make the world brighter. The visits with Charlie and Mia had become a rhythm in my life. Each month, their laughter filled the house, their chatter a bright thread woven into the quiet tapestry of my days. We built forts out of blankets, painted endless sheets of paper with colors that didn't always match, and laughed at the simplest jokes. Mia's curiosity was boundless, and she asked questions that reminded me how much children perceive, how much they understand, even when adults think they don't. "Grandma," she said one evening as we baked cookies, "why did Dad say such mean things?" I paused, kneading dough with more force than necessary, trying to channel my frustration into the task. "Sometimes," I said carefully, "people make choices driven by their own pain, their own greed, or their own fear. That doesn't make it right, but it does explain it." She nodded solemnly, absorbing the words. "I still love him," she whispered. I smiled, touched her cheek gently. "And that's okay. You can love someone even when they hurt you. But you don't have to let them hurt you again." Thomas continued to monitor David and Jessica's financial situation. Though I had no desire to gloat, it became impossible to ignore their decline. Their bankruptcy had stripped away their illusions of stability. The private school was replaced with public education, the luxury car with a 10-year-old sedan, and the boat that had barely been used was gone. Jessica worked long hours at a retail store, David at an electronics shop, and their lavish lifestyle was replaced by stress, scarcity, and uncertainty. I felt no satisfaction, only sadness that choices made from greed and entitlement had such consequences, especially for the children. And yet, the irony was not lost on me. In trying to control me, to threaten me, to manipulate me into altering my trust, they had sealed their own fate. Their actions had ensured that I could maintain my autonomy, that I could protect my wealth from misuse, and that I could provide real meaning to those who needed it most. I had survived their schemes, and more than that, I had flourished. My own life expanded in ways I hadn't anticipated. The book club recommended novels that challenged and inspired me. We debated characters' motives, moral dilemmas, and the nature of human resilience. Painting classes brought me back to a joy I had forgotten, mixing colors, creating shapes that expressed what words could not. I even sold a couple of pieces in a local gallery, feeling a quiet pride in creating something of beauty and value. Volunteering at the Children's Hospital became a cornerstone of my days. Reading to patients, playing board games, offering comfort to parents who were silently breaking under the weight of fear. These acts, small as they seemed, filled the gaps that David and Jessica had left in my life. The children's laughter, their innocent hope, reminded me why my fight had been worth it. Protecting myself had not been selfish. It had been necessary to continue offering love, guidance, and support where it truly mattered. The grandchildren's visits were filled with joy, but also a sense of responsibility. I wanted them to understand boundaries, respect, and love that was unconditional yet discerning. You are always loved, I told them often. You are always safe. And no one, not even your parents, can take that away. They nodded, sometimes confused by the complexity, but always trusting in my words. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the snow covered rooftops, I received a call from Emma. Her voice was bright, filled with warmth. Aunt Margaret, I've been thinking, why don't we start a small community project together? Something for kids who need hope? My heart swelled. Together, we would continue building, a bridge from what had been lost, a testament to resilience, love, and action. Looking back on the courtroom, the threats, the letters, and the manipulation, I realized that my true victory had never been legal. It had been personal. I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, my sense of self. The world could no longer dictate my worth or my choices. And in that reclaimed space, I found freedom, purpose, and unexpected joy. For David and Jessica, the consequences of their greed were undeniable. For me, the rewards of self preservation and intentional living were infinite. The snow outside had ceased, leaving a crisp, bright morning that seemed almost symbolic. A clean slate, a world full of possibility, a life fully lived on my terms. Spring arrived slowly, brushing Portland with a delicate warmth. Cherry blossoms bloomed along the streets, their petals swirling in the breeze like whispered promises. The city seemed reborn, and I felt it too. Each morning, I laced up my sneakers for my 3 mile run, feeling my lungs expand, my heart steady, muscles remembering strength I had almost forgotten. Life had shifted, and I was no longer running from fear or grief. I was running toward clarity and purpose. My mornings became ritualistic, almost sacred. Coffee in hand, I sat by the window, watching neighbors walk dogs, children chase pigeons, couples hold hands. I observed life moving forward, and for the first time, I felt fully part of it. Letters from students continued to arrive, each one a story of hope, growth, and gratitude. One young man, Ahmed, wrote about how he had almost dropped out of college after his father lost his job. But the scholarship I had funded allowed him to continue studying environmental science. He spoke of dreams to change his community, to protect forests and wildlife, and he thanked me for believing in him. Tears blurred my vision, but this time they were tears of joy. My resources were creating real, tangible change in the world, change that mattered far more than any inheritance could have. Charlie and Mia's visits became a rhythm that filled my home with laughter, chaos, and love. We played board games, read stories, and built forts with blankets and pillows, creating a world where imagination reigned and worries dissolved. Mia's questions, endless and probing, reminded me of the innocence that adults often lose. Grandma, why do people lie when they love someone? She asked one day, brushing flour off her hands after we baked cookies. I paused, considering my words carefully. Sometimes, people lie because they are afraid of consequences or they think it will make life easier. But lying doesn't mean love isn't real. It just means the person is struggling to express it in the right way. She nodded thoughtfully, absorbing the lesson with a seriousness beyond her years. The truth was, I still grieved, not just for the betrayal of my son, but for the parent child relationship I had imagined would exist. David's words echoed in my mind, harsh and uncompromising. Don't expect me to take care of you. I have my own life and family. That message had ripped through my heart like winter wind, stripping away illusions and forcing me to confront reality. Yet even in grief, there was empowerment. I had reclaimed control, and that control was liberating. I continued to paint, my canvases becoming a reflection of my internal journey. Bold strokes of blue and red captured anger, transformed into understanding. Gentle shades of pink and green reflected healing and hope. One of my pieces, a landscape of a sunrise over a snow-covered city, sold at a local gallery. A small triumph, but a reminder that creation is its own reward. Linda, my closest friend and confidant, often joined me in these sessions, and we discussed everything from art to philosophy, from grief to joy. She reminded me constantly that living fully required risk, creativity, and the courage to embrace both sorrow and beauty. Volunteering at the Children's Hospital became more than a hobby, it became a calling. Sitting with children undergoing treatment, reading stories, holding their hands, I found a sense of purpose that filled the void David had left. I saw strength in their fragile smiles, courage in their whispered fears, and resilience in their tiny triumphs. I realized that protecting myself from manipulation had not been an act of selfishness. It had been an act of preservation that allowed me to give meaningfully to others. Meanwhile, Thomas kept me informed about David and Jessica's financial situation, though I deliberately avoided seeking out too many details. They had declared bankruptcy, moved into a small, crowded apartment, and taken jobs that barely sustained them. Their lifestyle of privilege and entitlement had collapsed, and the consequences were inescapable. I felt no pleasure in their suffering, only sadness that greed and poor decisions had led to hardship, especially for the children. But I had no desire to interfere further. My responsibility was to protect myself and nurture the bonds that were healthy and real. My relationship with Emma deepened. She began visiting monthly, her presence a bridge between family and chosen family. Together, we started small projects, community drives for children, volunteer visits, and book club initiatives. Watching her grow, I saw the potential for kindness, leadership, and empathy. She reminded me that family is not just blood, it is shared values, mutual respect, and love expressed through action. As the months passed, I felt my confidence strengthen. I no longer feared confrontation or manipulation. I had learned that boundaries were not cruel, they were essential. Protecting my autonomy had given me clarity, and clarity had allowed me to engage in life fully, creatively, and meaningfully. I spent evenings on the porch, the scent of blooming flowers and fresh earth mingling with the crisp air, reflecting on how far I had come. The courtroom battles, the threats, and the betrayal had forged a resilience I had not known I possessed. Charlie and Mia's laughter, letters from students, visits with friends, painting, volunteering, these were the markers of a life reclaimed. Every action, every choice reinforced a truth I had fought to protect. My life belonged to me. And in that truth, I found freedom, purpose, and joy, a legacy far richer than money ever could be. Summer arrived in Portland like a gentle wave, warm air carrying the scent of blooming roses and freshly cut grass. The city thrummed with life, children running through sprinklers, couples biking along the waterfront, street musicians filling the sidewalks with music that made the air dance. I felt more alive than I had in years. Each morning I rose early, laced my running shoes, and moved with purpose, each step a reminder that my body, my mind, and my spirit were still my own. The past, with all its betrayal and heartbreak, had been transformed into a foundation for strength. Charlie and Mia's visits became the highlight of my weeks. Their energy, laughter, and curiosity reminded me of the joy that exists even in small moments. One afternoon, as we painted watercolor landscapes together, Charlie asked, "Grandma, did you ever think Dad would treat you this way?" I paused, considering how to answer honestly without casting judgment. "I hoped he wouldn't," I said softly. "I loved him and I trusted him. But sometimes people make choices that hurt the ones they should love the most." Mia looked up with wide eyes. "Does it mean he doesn't love you?" I shook my head gently. "Love isn't always shown the way we expect. Sometimes it's there, but it's buried under mistakes and fear. That's why we have to protect ourselves, even from people we care about." Volunteering at the Children's Hospital continued to fill me with purpose. The gratitude in the eyes of the kids, the relief on the faces of their parents, it was a gift I hadn't realized I was capable of giving myself. I began organizing reading circles, art sessions, and small events to bring moments of normalcy and joy to children who faced unimaginable challenges. I watched as timid children learned to smile, as brave little hands held paintbrushes for the first time, and as laughter replaced tears, even if only for a while. It was in these moments that I felt my true legacy growing, not in a bank account, but in hearts touched, lives encouraged, and hope restored. My friendships deepened, particularly with women from the book club. They were women of wisdom, humor, and compassion, each with a story that echoed my own in unexpected ways. Together, we debated literature, shared personal triumphs, and supported each other through life's complexities. One evening, after a particularly moving discussion on resilience in the face of adversity, Linda turned to me and said, "You've become a force, Margaret." You've turned heartbreak into purpose. It's inspiring. Her words warmed me, a quiet affirmation that the path I had chosen, though painful, was right. Emma's visits became a bridge between past and present, connecting me to family in a way that was healthy and genuine. Together, we worked on small community initiatives, book drives for underprivileged children, art workshops, and mentorship programs for teens. Watching her grow into a thoughtful, empathetic young woman reminded me that family is nurtured through care, guidance, and shared values, not entitlement or obligation. Her presence was a balm for the wounds left by David and Jessica, proof that meaningful connections could still flourish even when others faltered. Meanwhile, the repercussions of David and Jessica's financial recklessness became clearer. They struggled in their new apartment, budgeting tightly for the first time in years. Their children had been withdrawn from private school, and luxuries they once took for granted were now distant memories. Word reached me through mutual acquaintances and gentle updates from Thomas, who kept tabs discreetly. I felt sadness for the children more than satisfaction, understanding that their parents' choices had created hardship. Yet I remained firm in my boundaries. My role was to protect myself, offer supervised love, and maintain integrity, never to rescue those who had willfully disregarded me. In this season of growth, I returned to painting and creative expression with renewed energy. Canvases filled with vibrant landscapes, abstract patterns, and scenes of family and community adorned my home and studio. Each piece was a reflection of my journey. Anger transformed into insight, sorrow converted into beauty, and resilience etched in every brushstroke. The local gallery continued to showcase my work, and the modest sales were less about money and more about sharing a piece of my experience with the world. Physically, I was thriving. My doctor, after reviewing my recent checkups, commented on my cardiovascular health, saying I was 15 years younger than my actual age. This news reinforced my commitment to movement, nutrition, and mental wellness. My days were filled with purpose: running, volunteering, painting, connecting with friends and family, and nurturing relationships built on mutual respect. I had discovered a freedom I hadn't known existed: the freedom to prioritize my well being, my choices, and my happiness without guilt or fear. Evenings on the porch became a time for reflection and gratitude. The sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, and the world seemed to pause for a moment, allowing me to breathe, to think, and to appreciate the life I had reclaimed. I understood now that my worth was not measured by obedience, compliance, or inheritance. It was measured by integrity, love, and the positive impact I could make on others. I had endured betrayal, fought for my autonomy, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more fulfilled. And through it all, Charlie and Mia reminded me that family, real family, was not defined solely by blood or expectation, but by love, respect, and shared experiences. Each hug, each laugh, each whispered, "I love you, Grandma," reinforced the truth I had fought so hard to embrace. I had created a life that mattered. I had reclaimed joy. I had discovered that strength and kindness could coexist, that boundaries were acts of love, and that legacy was built in hearts, not bank accounts. Autumn returned to Portland with a crisp edge, the maple trees blazing in shades of amber, crimson, and gold. The city streets were alive with the crunch of fallen leaves underfoot, the smell of roasting chestnuts from street vendors, and the distant laughter of children returning from school. I felt a surge of contentment walking through the park that morning, my steps steady, my mind clear. For the first time in years, I didn't feel weighed down by fear, anger, or anxiety. Life had unfolded in ways I never could have predicted, but I had survived it, and more importantly, I had thrived. Charlie and Mia's visits continued under the court-supervised arrangement. The initial awkwardness had faded, replaced with warmth and familiarity. We baked pumpkin bread in the kitchen, our laughter echoing through the house. Charlie carefully measured the flour, his tongue sticking out in concentration, while Mia decorated the loaves with little smiley faces made of icing. "Grandma, can we take one to school tomorrow?" Charlie asked, eyes sparkling. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, smiling. "And we can make extra for your teachers, too." Watching them enjoy simple pleasures reminded me that life's smallest moments often held the greatest meaning. One day, as we were reading together in the living room, Mia asked, "Grandma, why don't Mom and Dad let us come see you more?" Her question was quiet, almost hesitant, but it pierced me more deeply than anything else had in months. I hugged her close and said gently, "Sometimes, grown-ups make choices that aren't fair, even to the people they love. But that doesn't change how much I love you. I'll always be here for you whenever you need me. She leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder, and I realized that my love could reach them even when their parents' decisions had created distance. That love, unconditional and patient, was something no one could take from me. Meanwhile, David and Jessica's financial collapse had become a quiet rumor in our community. I didn't seek out their downfall, but in a city as connected as Portland, word travels. Their bankruptcy filings, the repossession of their car, the loss of the boat, and their sudden need to work full-time jobs. They were all consequences of choices they had made with reckless confidence in an inheritance that would never come. I felt a twinge of sadness for them, but it was tempered by the knowledge that I had done everything I could to protect myself, my grandchildren, and my dignity. There was a strange justice in seeing their plans unravel, but I refused to indulge in schadenfreude. Life had taught me that compassion, even for those who had wronged us, is a strength, not a weakness. I focused on my own life with renewed energy. My mornings were spent running through the riverside trails, the wind on my face invigorating, my heart steady and strong. Afternoons were filled with painting, volunteering at the children's hospital, and mentoring young women in my community. I helped organize art therapy workshops, reading sessions, and community service projects, using my time and resources to give back in ways that were meaningful and lasting. Each act of service, each smile I could coax from a child's face, was a reminder that my life had purpose far beyond financial considerations or family drama. Friendships flourished as well. The book club had become more than just a place to discuss novels. It was a sanctuary where stories, experiences, and wisdom were shared freely. Late nights were spent on my porch with Linda and the others, sipping tea and talking about everything from philosophy to personal triumphs. Their support was unwavering, and in their company, I discovered the value of chosen family. These were people who honored my journey, celebrated my victories, and supported me through setbacks. I realized that life was not about the people who failed to see your worth, but about those who stood beside you in respect and love. Emma and I deepened our bond too. Our monthly visits became opportunities to mentor, laugh, and grow together. We worked on small projects for the community, from charity drives to local art exhibits, each collaboration reinforcing the idea that family is more than blood. It is connection, trust, and shared values. Watching her develop into a compassionate, intelligent, and independent young woman filled me with pride. She was living proof that love and guidance, even from a distance, could shape the next generation for the better. Through all of this, I continued to reflect on my relationship with David. The hallway confrontation, the courtroom battles, the letters and threats, they had all left scars. Yet with each passing day, I understood something crucial. Love does not require self-sacrifice to the point of harm. Protecting oneself, maintaining dignity, and setting boundaries are not betrayals of love, they are acts of it. My son's choices did not define my worth, my capacity to love, or my right to happiness. I had learned to disentangle love from expectation, and in that freedom, I had discovered peace. Evenings became moments of meditation and quiet joy. Watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, I felt gratitude for survival, for clarity, and for the life I had carved out on my own terms. The freedom to live authentically, to pursue joy, and to offer love without compromise. It was intoxicating in its simplicity. The world had not been fair, but I had found my own fairness within it. My legacy was not in a bank account, but in the hearts I touched, the minds I inspired, and the life I lived fully and unapologetically. Winter arrived quietly in Portland, dusting the city with frost and filling the mornings with mist that curled around the street lamps like ghostly ribbons. I watched from my living room window as the first snowflakes fell, drifting lazily onto the dark asphalt, covering the world in a soft, muffled quiet. There was a stillness in the air that felt like permission, a pause from the chaos, a chance to reflect on everything that had transpired. I felt stronger than ever, yet a quiet part of me remained alert, cautious of the fragile peace I had fought so hard to achieve. Charlie and Mia's visits continued under court supervision, scheduled twice a month now, each session filled with laughter, learning, and the kind of moments that no amount of money could ever buy. We made paper snowflakes together, decorated the house with garlands, and I told them stories of my own childhood winters, the smell of cookies baking in the oven, the warmth of family gatherings. They listened intently, their wide eyes reflecting wonder and trust, and for a moment, the wounds of betrayal and family tension seemed to dissolve. "Grandma, do you ever get lonely?" Mia asked one afternoon, brushing snow off the windowsill. I shook my head, smiling. Lonely? No, I have you, and I have the friends and the life I've built. I've learned that loneliness isn't about being alone, it's about not being surrounded by love and respect. And I have plenty of that. The letter I had sent to David and Jessica months ago had stirred no response, until recently. One morning, a registered courier delivered an envelope with no return address. Inside was a note, short, awkward, and yet laden with meaning. We understand. We are sorry. We are trying to do better. No excuses, no justification, just acknowledgement. It wasn't a reconciliation, not yet, but it was a start. A fragile bridge over a river I hadn't expected to cross again. I folded the note carefully and placed it on my desk, feeling the weight of years of tension ease slightly. Thomas suggested I wait before responding, and I agreed. Patience had been my greatest ally in this long struggle, and now it would guide me once more. Meanwhile, my philanthropic efforts expanded. The scholarship fund at Roberts University had blossomed, now supporting 5 students in total. Their letters of gratitude poured in, filled with earnest words and hopeful dreams. One student, Leela, wrote of being the first in her family to attend college and how the fund had made her ambitions tangible. I kept each letter, a tangible reminder that true legacy is measured in the lives we touch, not in the inheritance we leave behind. At the Children's Hospital, I began organizing interactive reading sessions, crafting stories for children too sick to leave their beds, their eyes lighting up with joy and imagination. In these moments, I found purpose, fulfillment, and a sense of continuity that transcended personal grievances or past hurts. My personal life thrived alongside these endeavors. My morning runs became longer, my strength and endurance returning in ways I hadn't felt since my 30s. My doctor marveled at my cardiovascular health, joking that I was living proof that age is relative to how you treat your body. Painting became a meditative escape, a dialogue with myself expressed through color and texture. I sold several pieces in a local gallery, each sale a small affirmation that life, creativity, and passion never have an expiration date. Linda and the book club became constants in my life, our discussions ranging from classic literature to modern social issues, always circling back to the one thing we all valued most: truth and authenticity. David and Jessica's situation continued to deteriorate, though I refrained from checking constantly. Rumors trickled in: bankruptcy, cramped living conditions, lost employment, and the struggles of adjusting to a lifestyle they had taken for granted. I felt sadness for them, but also clarity. This was the natural consequence of choices made without foresight or integrity. I could not undo their mistakes, nor did I wish to. My responsibility was to protect myself and to nurture the life I had cultivated with care, wisdom, and love. One evening, after a visit from Charlie and Mia, I sat by the fireplace with a cup of tea, reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. From the first shocking text, through the threats, courtroom battles, and manipulations, to the victories, both large and small, I realized that my life had been defined not by the actions of others, but by the resilience, courage, and clarity I brought to each situation. Love could be painful, betrayal could be sharp, and family could be complicated. But I had learned that freedom, self-respect, and purpose were non-negotiable. I drafted letters for Charlie and Mia, to be given to them when they turned 18, explaining everything with honesty and care. Not as a means of blame, but as a guide to understanding, resilience, and hope. I wanted them to know they were loved unconditionally, that their worth was not measured by the mistakes of their parents, and that they had a grandmother who would always stand for them. Writing these letters, I felt a profound sense of continuity, a way to ensure that the cycles of greed, entitlement, and manipulation would not repeat in their lives. Night fell and the snow continued to drift silently over the city. The world outside was quiet, but inside my heart was full. I had survived the storm. I had navigated betrayal, manipulation, and grief. I had protected myself and nurtured the people who mattered most. And in doing so, I had discovered something greater than victory or revenge. I had discovered the power of self-love, resilience, and intentional living. Life had given me clarity, and I had chosen to embrace it fully. Spring arrived slowly, tentatively at first, brushing Portland with soft shades of green and the scent of rain-damp earth. Cherry blossoms bloomed along the avenues, petals floating like pink snow in the morning light. The city seemed to breathe again, and I felt it too. My heart lighter, my body stronger, my mind sharper. Each day began with a 3-mile run along the river trail, my breaths misting in the cool air. my muscles stretching and waking as if they were celebrating survival itself. Life, in all its chaos and beauty, had returned. The visits with Charlie and Mia had become a rhythm, a heartbeat I anticipated eagerly. 2 hours of laughter, stories, and snowball fights, or sidewalk chalk on warmer days, were enough to remind me why every battle, every moment of fear had been worth it. I watched them growing, curious and kind, their innocence untouched despite the storm of adult greed swirling around them. Grandma, can we go to the library next time? Charlie asked one visit, his eyes bright. Of course, I said, smiling, and I'll let you pick the books. The simple joy of offering guidance, of nurturing curiosity, reminded me that true connection does not require control, it requires presence. Meanwhile, my philanthropic efforts expanded. The scholarship fund now supported 7 students. Each letter of thanks a testament to lives touched and futures reshaped. Leela, the first-generation college student, sent a photograph of herself in her graduation gown. I framed it on my desk. In the children's hospital, my volunteering had evolved into a small program I helped coordinate, reading, painting, and playing games with the young patients, bringing warmth and distraction from their pain. Each smile, each laugh, felt like a tiny victory over the grief and betrayal I had endured. At home, I pursued passions that had long been shelved. Painting occupied my evenings, the brush strokes translating emotions I had no words for. I sold 3 pieces at a local gallery, each sale a validation not of my skill, but of my commitment to living fully. I joined Linda and the book club weekly, discussing literature, art, and life. The women in the group, ranging from their 50s to 80s, became my chosen family. Their support, humor, and wisdom filled spaces that had once been occupied by doubt and fear. David and Jessica's decline continued, though I avoided dwelling on it too much. Whispers of bankruptcy, job losses, and a dramatically reduced lifestyle reached me through acquaintances and small, unintended glimpses of social media. Their private world was crumbling under choices they had made recklessly. While I felt no glee in their struggles, I understood the truth. Consequences exist for a reason. One cannot build a life on entitlement and manipulation without eventually facing the reckoning. Then, one quiet afternoon, a knock at the door interrupted my painting. A courier handed me an envelope marked urgent. Inside was a letter from the court-appointed supervisor, who oversaw my visits with Charlie and Mia. They had turned 18, well, almost, but the supervisor had arranged for a prelude to the letters I had prepared for them, offering guidance, context, and a gentle introduction to understanding the financial and emotional landscape of their family. It was professional, neutral, and yet somehow tender, a bridge between my intentions and their comprehension. I felt a surge of pride and protective love. My planning, foresight, and patience had created a pathway for them to navigate adulthood with clarity and support, not resentment. Even my health reflected the changes. My doctor's visits became celebrations of vitality. Blood pressure, heart rate, and cholesterol, everything pointed to resilience. Keep doing what you're doing, she said with a smile. Your cardiovascular health is extraordinary for someone your age. I nodded, feeling the truth of her words. Life was no longer about mere survival, it was about thriving. Relationships beyond my immediate circle also flourished. My niece Emma and I grew closer, our bond evolving from casual family ties into deep friendship. We shared dinners, stories, and even small adventures around the city. You're the wisest person I know, Aunt Margaret, she said one evening, her voice sincere. Coming from someone who barely knew me a year ago, it was a balm to the soul, a reminder that love and respect could be cultivated anew. Despite these personal victories, the shadow of David and Jessica lingered. I had chosen not to interfere in their lives, beyond what was necessary to ensure the well-being of my grandchildren. Still, the contrast between our paths was stark. While I nurtured purpose, creativity, and genuine connection, they scrambled to rebuild what they had carelessly dismantled. The consequences of their greed were unavoidable, and watching from a distance, I felt neither vindication nor bitterness, only clarity. My responsibility was my own life, my own choices, my own family by design, not by blood alone. As spring deepened, I realized that I had transformed. From the moment of that first devastating text to the court battles, betrayals, and manipulations, I had grown into a version of myself I barely recognized, but profoundly respected. I had learned that autonomy is not selfishness, that boundaries are not cruelty, and that true family is built on respect and care, not obligation. Each day, each visit, each act of service and creativity reinforced this lesson. One evening, as the sun set in shades of rose and gold over the river, I sipped tea by the window, reflecting on the journey. I had lost, in a way, the sun I thought I knew, but I had gained something infinitely more valuable: clarity, strength, and a life fully lived. And for the first time in years, I understood that winning was not about revenge or control. It was about choosing oneself, protecting one's dignity, and building a legacy of meaning, love, and resilience. Summer arrived in Portland like a quiet celebration, the days stretching long and golden, the scent of jasmine and freshly cut grass lingering in the evenings. I woke each morning to sunlight streaming through the living room windows, illuminating the familiar chaos of art supplies, books, and small trinkets collected over a lifetime. Life had taken on a rhythm I cherished: purposeful, self directed, filled with moments that nourished the soul rather than depleted it. Charlie and Mia's visits had become a cornerstone of my weeks. 2 hours once a month that felt like a lifetime condensed into joy. We baked bread and cookies, played board games, and sometimes, when the weather allowed, picnicked by the river. I watched them, marveling at how much they resembled the children I had once hoped to nurture in a household that could have been filled with love instead of manipulation. "Grandma, will you come to our school play?" Mia asked one visit, eyes wide. "Of course, sweetheart, front row, and I'll cheer the loudest," I said. Their laughter, their energy, their trust, it was the purest reward I had ever received, and it reminded me that resilience could bloom even after betrayal. My work at the Children's Hospital had evolved. I no longer merely read stories. I organized small art therapy sessions, coordinated visits from local musicians, and even set up a tiny library corner stocked with donated books. Each child I saw carried a world of pain and uncertainty, yet the resilience in their eyes mirrored my own journey. I became known among the staff as someone who brought warmth and calm into the most chaotic days. Their gratitude, often silent but deeply felt, reaffirmed my belief that legacy was built through deeds, not inheritance. My friendships, once sparse and tentative, had flourished into a network of trust and support. The book club had grown into something more: a circle of women who shared wisdom, humor, and solace. We met not just to discuss literature, but to exchange life lessons, to celebrate victories, and to console losses. In their company, I discovered that chosen family could sometimes be more steadfast than blood relations. Their advice, encouragement, and companionship reminded me daily that I was not alone and never had to be. Financially, I had stabilized. The trust was intact, the scholarship fund flourishing, and my own spending measured but joyous. I indulged in small luxuries: a trip to the local art museum, a weekend getaway to the coast, a new set of paints, without guilt or fear of manipulation. Each purchase, each decision, was a quiet affirmation of autonomy and control over my life. The freedom to live on my terms, to make choices uncoerced, felt revolutionary after years of conflict and threat. David and Jessica's situation continued to unravel, though I rarely sought details. I knew from whispers and occasional sightings that the bankruptcy had forced them into a much smaller home, the luxury lifestyle replaced by necessity and compromise. David now worked long hours at a modest electronics store. Jessica had taken a job in retail, a world far removed from the private schools and country clubs they had once inhabited. Their children, Charlie and Mia, remained my priority, their well being guiding every decision I made regarding boundaries and contact. One afternoon, a letter arrived from a family counselor assigned by the court to oversee the grandchildren's welfare. It was detailed, careful, and compassionate, an outline for fostering communication and stability between me and the children. The counselor noted Charlie's increasing curiosity and Mia's empathetic nature, suggesting activities to support their emotional growth. Reading it, I felt the weight of responsibility, but also a profound sense of peace. I was no longer reacting to threats or manipulation. I was actively shaping an environment for love, learning, and resilience. In this period of calm, I reflected on the lessons learned over the past years: the court battles, the betrayal, the manipulations, the legal documents, the sleepless nights filled with worry and anger. I realized that the most important victories were internal: clarity over confusion, dignity over shame, self respect over desperation, autonomy over control. These victories were invisible to the outside world, but monumental to the soul. I also began to confront my grief openly. Losing the son I had believed I knew was a wound that would never fully close, but acknowledging it allowed me to live without bitterness. Therapy sessions, journaling, and conversations with trusted friends helped me navigate the complex emotions of love and betrayal coexisting. I learned to separate the child I had raised from the adult he had become, recognizing that while I could guide, protect, and love, I could not control or save anyone else from their choices. Meanwhile, my art and volunteer work intertwined beautifully. I began a project combining my love for painting and storytelling, creating illustrated books for the children in the hospital. Each page carried messages of hope, resilience, and courage, stories I wished I could have told my grandchildren in a world untouched by greed and manipulation. Sharing these books during visits became a sacred ritual, moments of teaching, comfort, and connection that extended my influence far beyond my immediate family. Evenings were quiet, filled with reflection and gratitude. I watched sunsets from my porch, sometimes accompanied by a cup of tea, sometimes by Emma or a friend from the book club. The conversations ranged from trivial delights to profound musings on life and death, love and betrayal. I had reclaimed not only my autonomy, but also my joy, my purpose, and my sense of belonging. One warm evening, as the sky painted itself in shades of orange and violet, I sat with a letter I had written but had not yet sent. It was addressed to David and Jessica, not as a plea or demand, but as a statement of clarity, boundaries, and hope. I reminded them, gently but firmly, of the choices they had made, the consequences of those choices, and the enduring love I held for Charlie and Mia. I offered guidance, not forgiveness contingent on manipulation, but hope for understanding and growth. Holding the pen, I felt the weight lift, knowing that setting boundaries was not cruelty, it was protection. As summer deepened, I realized that the story of betrayal, courtrooms, and manipulation had transformed into a story of strength, autonomy, and enduring love. I had won not by taking revenge, not by seeking retribution, but by choosing myself, protecting my dignity, and fostering genuine connections. Life, in all its messy, unpredictable beauty, was mine again. Autumn arrived with a crispness that carried the scent of change. The cherry blossoms had faded, replaced by amber leaves drifting lazily to the ground. I watched them from my porch, feeling a quiet contentment I hadn't known in years. Life had slowed to a rhythm I could cherish, one I had chosen entirely for myself. I no longer measured days in obligations or manipulations, but in the small victories of autonomy and genuine connection. The visits with Charlie and Mia continued under court supervision, but they had evolved into something meaningful. We established routines, afternoons filled with art, baking, reading, and walks in the nearby park. I taught them to plant flowers, to observe the clouds, to notice the subtle magic in everyday life. Watching them grow, curious, bright, and resilient, gave me a profound sense of purpose. I saw in their eyes a reflection of the love I had fought to protect, a reminder that nurture could survive even in fractured circumstances. One October afternoon, Mia asked me quietly, "Grandma, why didn't Mom and Dad want to see us with you before?" I hesitated, searching for words that were truthful yet gentle. "Sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt the people they love," I said slowly. "But I want you to know something important. I will always love you. Always. Even when you are grown up. Even if life gets complicated." She hugged me tightly, and in that embrace, I felt the pain of betrayal ease just a little. My volunteer work at the Children's Hospital had taken on new depth. I began organizing small programs to teach emotional resilience, creativity, and problem solving. The illustrated books I had created for the children had become a small library corner in one of the wards. And the joy it brought me seeing kids engage with stories of courage and hope was immeasurable. Each interaction reminded me that legacy was not defined by wealth or inheritance, but by the positive impact left on others. Emma had become a constant presence in my life, visiting monthly, sharing meals, laughter, and stories of her own life. Her respect, admiration, and genuine friendship had grown into something I had never expected from a niece I barely knew a year ago. She reminded me that family was as much about choice as it was about blood, and that the love of those who truly valued you could heal even the deepest wounds. Financially, I had established boundaries I never would have dared to enforce in the past. The trust remained intact, the scholarship fund at Roberts University continued to grow, and my personal finances were stable and thoughtfully managed. I spent money on experiences, learning, and joy, each decision a reaffirmation of my autonomy. No longer did I feel the pressure of expectation or manipulation. I was free to live on my terms, and in that freedom, I discovered a profound sense of peace. David and Jessica's situation continued to deteriorate, though I rarely sought out the details. their financial collapse was complete. Bankruptcy, downsized living arrangements, and the loss of luxuries they had taken for granted. I felt no satisfaction in their misfortune, only sorrow that their choices had hurt their children. But even in that sorrow, I understood a vital truth. I could not save them from themselves. My responsibility was to protect myself and nurture those I could reach, Charlie and Mia. One chilly evening, a letter arrived from the court appointed supervisor overseeing grandparent visitation. It was detailed, compassionate, and filled with guidance on fostering healthy connections with the children. The supervisor noted how attentive I was to their emotional needs, how consistent I had become, and how deeply the children responded to my care. Reading it, I felt a quiet affirmation that my efforts mattered, that my love could thrive even within constrained circumstances. The most profound lessons had come from within. I had learned that autonomy and self respect were not acts of selfishness, but acts of survival and dignity. I had discovered that love and betrayal could coexist, and that grief did not negate strength. I had built a life rich with meaning, with friends, purpose, and creativity. I had learned to embrace joy without guilt, to make choices without fear, and to set boundaries without shame. The holidays arrived quietly. Charlie and Mia spent the day with me, baking cookies and reading stories. We watched the snow start to fall softly outside, and I felt a warmth that had little to do with the fire in the fireplace. It was a warmth born of clarity, resilience, and the knowledge that I had fought for, and one, the right to live fully and freely. As I watched them leave that evening, Mia whispered, "Grandma, can we come back soon?" I knelt and held them close. "Anytime, sweetheart." "Always." Charlie waved, his eyes bright with the unspoken understanding that our bond was strong, unbreakable, and rooted in love rather than obligation. In the quiet that followed, I reflected on the journey, the betrayals, the threats, the court battles, and the lonely nights filled with doubt. Every trial had led to this clarity, freedom, and a life I had consciously chosen. I realized that true legacy was not measured by inheritance, but by the lives touched, the lessons imparted, and the dignity maintained in the face of adversity. I took a deep breath, savoring the stillness. I had fought for respect, autonomy, and love on my own terms, and I had succeeded. The past could not be changed, nor could the choices of others. But I could control my life, my responses, and the love I extended to those who mattered. That knowledge, that freedom, was a gift far greater than anything money could buy. And as I looked out at the snow dusted street, at the quiet beauty of a life reclaimed, I understood fully. The victory was mine, not in spite of the pain, but because of it. I had chosen myself, demanded respect, nurtured love, and built a life of meaning. That was the true inheritance, one I could cherish every single day.